Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May we both, teachers and students, may we all be protected. May we be nourished. May we together acquire the capacity to study and understand what we study. May our study be brilliant. May we not disagree with one another. Om, peace, 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 unto the three sources of karma. And so we begin. All right. Somebody, okay. All righty. So we're just going to go for it. We're just going to dive right in. What are some of the things that we would consider when sharing yoga nidra with students or clients, family members, and so on? And so there's this list here, and we'll spend today going through these things. We would consider, what is the purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Of course, as I said in the first class of this program, I always consider why I'm doing what I'm doing before I do anything, hopefully. What is the teaching point, which is also part of the purpose or should be connected to the purpose? What is the environment? Is the environment supportive of the Yoga Nidra experience? What is the body's position? So the individual environment. What is the role of the teacher? How long is this guided awareness experience going to be? And what is the context in which I'm doing this Yoga Nidra? Is it part of a yoga class? Is it Yoga Nidra on its own? And so on. Okay. So one of the considerations when we're thinking about the environment and the script, many of those items, the environment, the script, the person's body position, and so on, we will think about neutrality. So I described when talking about the Shavasana position that it is a neutral position. And we want the whole setup for Yoga Nidra to be in a neutral zone so that the mind or body is not activated, overstimulated, understimulated, and so on in some way. And so when we're thinking about neutrality in a yogic sense, then we have to think about the gunas. So the guna is used in a number of ways, and I'm going to draw out two aspects of what is called guna. Guna is often translated as quality. So those of you who are Ayurvedis in the group who have studied Ayurveda or are even practitioners, you're going to be familiar with the 10 pairs of opposites or the 20 gunas. And I have a few of them listed here, which are the main pairs of opposites that I would think about when I'm thinking about a Yoga Nidra environment and setup. So hot, cold, Ushna and Sita. We don't want the room or the body to be either too hot or too cold. Imagine yourself sleeping in bed at night and all of a sudden the temperature drops or goes up a lot. You'll be woken up. Okay, and some of us have had that experience in the dead of winter or the heat of summer, waking due to extreme of hot or cold. Okay. We also don't want either too heavy of an environment nor too light. So heavy guru, light laghu. And that can show up in a number of ways. Literally the light. You don't want to have the lights on super bright for Yoga Nidra. That would be stimulating. But you actually also don't want a completely dark room, because remember that the Yoga Nidra experience is not one of unconscious sleep or going unconscious into consciousness, but going awarefully into the deep sleep state. So we want to be in this sort of sweet zone between not too dark, neither too light. Also heavy light in terms of how you're propping the person. So in the demo video that I did of Shavasana, for example, I showed the idea of laying weighted blankets on a student or on yourself for a Yoga Nidra experience or a Shavasana experience. And it has to be just right for the individual, okay? So some people with no weight on them, if they themselves carry a lot of lightness, will have too much of a lagu quality, too much lightness, and so the weight will help them. Other people who already have a heaviness, too much kapha, too much tamas, heavy body or a heavy sluggish mind, they may love the weight, but too much of it will increase heaviness too much. And again, they may have a nice nap, but it will block the Yoga Nidra experience. So we're looking for the sweet zone right in between these pairs of opposites. Neither too sthula nor too sukshma, not too gross nor too subtle. And so, for example, you don't want your voice to be too loud nor too quiet, right? Not too harsh sounding. Harsha is harsh in Sanskrit. Not too harsh sounding, and also not too soft and airy fairy sounding either. Okay, so not too gross, not too subtle. As well, the guided awareness shouldn't focus too much on solely the gross level body. Okay, there should be a subtle aspect, but also not solely diving right into something like talking about chakras and channels and subtle field things. If you're going to do those subtle things, you also must start at least with the gross. And we'll see that as we dive into the script more specifically. If you're going to focus on the physical body, do some process of drawing the script at some point towards something more subtle, even if you're being vague about it. You don't have to talk about the subtle body field in terms of chakras and nadis and so on specifically, but you can just draw them inward to something subtle. Okay, even if you're doing the physical body, you could say that talking about the nerves would be more subtle than talking about the bones. So not too gross, not too subtle. And then not too soft nor too hard. We could think about the floor. Most students would not have a very deep experience of Yoga Nidra if they were on a marble floor, though that's how I did it in travels to India. Okay, a marble floor might block the experience, but also a soft bed, smushy soft bed, while it may support unconscious sleep, may be problematic for the Yoga Nidra experience. So not too soft, mrutu, nor too hard, katina. Okay, and then the other gunas that most yoga people will know is sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the Yoga Nidra experience is unique to the deep sleep experience in that it is a sattvic state. It is not made of tamas. So sattva is associated with harmony, tranquility, peacefulness, a quiet awarefulness is sattva in terms of the mind. Rajas is associated with passion, with divisiveness, with activity, with heat. This is rajas. Not really simpatico with the Yoga Nidra experience. And tamas is, I just baked some cookies before this class, and I have this black tahini in the refrigerator. So I made black cookies, and I said to my husband, I could make black tahini molasses cookies. They'll be black tamas, gooey black tamas cookies. So that's what tamas is, the black, sticky, heavy goo. And it's what we want in order to go into deep unconscious sleep every night, but it's going to block Yoga Nidra experience. So we don't want to have too much of a heaviness quality and a tamas quality. You're not trying to put people to sleep, though if they fall asleep, that's certainly beneficial because they probably need sleep, okay? we're trying to keep them in a sattvic state. So neither active, passionate, thinking, bubbling up, rajas, neither going into unconsciousness, tamas. We want to be in sattva. Okay? Neutrality. And the shavasana position, being neutral for the spine, in and of itself takes care of a lot of this. Okay? And then everything else you would do will support neutrality. So as you are setting up, as you're designing a Shavasana script in your voice with your own teaching flavor, as you are designing a Yoga Nidra offering, you can always return to, if you think about, well, should I play music and what music should I play? And you get some ideas, then you can always come back to this and go, is this too subtle, too gross? Is it sattvic or is it actually rajasic? Is it a little bit activating or is it too tamasic? You can take all of that into account as you think about all the main principles of setting up Yoga Nidra offerings. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about teaching themes and then I'll break for some questions if there are any at that point. So again, I'm a big fan of teaching with purpose. I really think there's a lot of value in having a purpose behind everything that you do, being connected to the dharma of everything you do, no matter how mundane, okay? And that is true of teaching yoga and offering Yoga Nidra. So it is ideal to me that you have a theme that's overriding any offering that you do in yoga, something that makes sense. It can be simple and it can be threaded through the whole experience in the way that there's a single thread holding together the beads of a mala, okay, or a prayer necklace. Without the thread, they're just a bunch of beads. With the thread, that mala has a particular purpose, and those beads all make sense together. Okay, and so what I suggest is that you think of a teaching point and then you create a contemplation and a sankalpa, or both, and we're going to talk about sankalpa and contemplation, that fits the point, and then create a guided awareness script that is also associated with that same point. And then do poses and practices. If you're doing Yoga Nidra embedded into, say, a yoga class, then write a sequence of poses and practices that are also associated with that same point so that it's threaded all the way through. This ultimately, in my experience, makes designing a class easier because you're anchored in something. Without the anchor of a theme, the world is wide open. You can just throw a bunch of random stuff together and it actually is more overwhelming. With a theme, you are forced to anchor yourself in a purpose, and suddenly the yoga contemplation comes, the poses that are suitable to that theme come to you more clearly. A Yoga Nidra script suddenly makes sense. You know exactly what to talk about and so on. So it's particularly effective if you're going to teach with themes and use themes in a Yoga Nidra or have contemplations when it's introduced at the beginning so that it's threaded all of the way through a Yoga Nidra script or all of the way through a full yoga class with Yoga Nidra. And so I'm going to give, let's see, I have a couple examples of things that I've done. Let's see. Okay, so I've been teaching on Soma Nectar for the past year. And so a lot of my classes have been variations on the theme of Soma. And you all had the Soma Nidra. I think it was in the first week of this program, that recording. So in that recording, I offer a contemplation on Soma. So my purpose is Soma. I offer a contemplation on Soma, something like the Soma, the full moon in the head rains nectar down day and night. It's a translation from an ancient text, Shiva Samhita. And then the whole guided awareness is based on that Soma nectar dripping down, down, down through the spine and nourishing the spine and the whole body. So I keep coming back to that dripping down soma throughout the whole guided awareness. And then at the end, after the silence, I repeat that same contemplation. And that's true of all of the Yoga Nidra recordings that you have in this course. They all have a really clear theme. They all start with a contemplation or a sankalpa. Again, I'll talk more about those in a little bit. And then if it were a fuller offering, then what I would do is spend the whole rest of the class doing yoga poses, because I might start with Shavasana, spend the whole rest of the class doing soma-based poses. Some of you have studied those with me. So poses that move the spine in a particularly slow way with a particular kind of awareness, focusing on those soma poses that help to extract the soma and cultivate it and hold the soma in the body. We might do soma mantras and soma pranayama. And then maybe again at the end of that class, I would do the soma nidra again, so that the whole point is soma. It's all woven together like that. It's a little bit more of an esoteric theme. You could do a theme on safety, security, and groundedness, let's say. All right. Feeling safe and secure. It's a very good time of year, considering the elections have just happened. It's also autumn time of year. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, this is a Vata deranging time of year. People feel ungrounded. So it would be a good seasonal theme to do something having to do with being grounded, feeling safe and secure. And so you could do a sankalpa that has to do, or a contemplation that has to do with being protected, feeling protected. So you can say, right now, I am safe and protected. And then you can do a whole guided awareness. Let's say you start at the head. Be aware of your head, your whole head. Your head is safe and protected right now. And then do that through the whole body. You can go into subtle layers or not, okay? As long as you do something subtle. If you just say, and deeper inside, that goes subtle, as long as you address the subtle in some way, okay? Safe and protected right now, and so on. And then what would you do with the rest of the class? If you started with Shavasana and that's your teaching point, and then you do what? I would do very supported, restorative poses, supine and prone, lots of props, lying down, leaning into the floor, and then drawing the student's attention to, what does it feel like to lean into support? Can you let go into that support even more? You are safe and protected. Allow that support to protect you. Okay, something like that, for example. And those that want to bring things all the way to the nature of consciousness, you know, you could take a theme like that and as people are opening up and having an experience of what it's like to be safe and protected, you can take it all the way to consciousness. And you can say, the more I recognize that I am supported and protected, the more I let go. The more I let go, the more I discover that consciousness is always safe and protected. Consciousness remains unaffected by anything that happens to me. Okay? Like that. So some of you may already teach with themes, and the beauty, magic, and power of then weaving a theme into Yoga Nidra has to do with everything you've learned about the Yoga Nidra state up to this point, particularly about reaching into the causal body, reaching into the level of samskara. So if we're introducing something at that level of the being, it's even more powerful. It has a deeper resolution effect on the practitioners, the recipients of that offering. And you're inserting a sankalpa or a teaching point, threading it, inserting it into even Shavasana. You're inserting it into the consciousness at a very deep level and allowing students to marinate in that teaching point at a deeper level, literally in the subtle body. So that allows you to carry a principle essentially through all of the koshas. Because if they go to yoga nidra state, then that contemplation, that sankalpa, that teaching point is going all the way to Anandamaya kosha, or the bliss sheath. All right. All right, so before I go more into Sankalpa, where we're going to end up today is looking at specifically writing a script, but this is all preparing for that. Before I talk Sankalpa, do you have any questions about teaching with a theme, about this idea of neutrality? You can unmute yourself if you have a question.
Question.
Up. Is it Gelsey? Yeah. Yes.
I was just looking for confirmation that the basic yoga nidra that is done in a lot of Svarupa classes or like contemplative classes is the more subtle awareness doing the outside to inside.
So outside is gross, inside is subtle.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are more some of the classical approaches to yoga nidra will take you from being aware of the sound around you to being aware of the physical body, tracking through the physical body in a particular way, then into being aware of the breath. Okay, so Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, and then going into being aware of certain chakra points, okay, particularly the third eye, the throat, and the heart, but some will do all the way down all of the chakras, and then going into the space inside of the chakras. Okay, so gross to subtle, so that's another approach. And I have one similar like that, my Prana Nidra recording, okay. And that's why I was saying, Gelsey, that the gross or subtle can be relatively vague. It can just be inside or into the space inside or in, something like that that's more vague.
Yeah.
Ron, did you have a question?
Yeah, it would help me if you could do the thumbnail explanation of the relationship between contemplation and sankalpa.
Sankalpa, yes, I'm going to do that now. That's exactly what I'm going to do now. Tracking right along. Unless there's any other question.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you were talking about setting up a neutral environment and that weighted blankets would be a consideration for some, but not all.
Yeah.
If you were offering this in like a group setting where you didn't know personally the individual students, is there like a way to tell like who needs them and who doesn't, or how would, instead of just like a quote unquote blanket prop for everybody, right?
Right. I don't put that on everybody. Although once some students have that experience, they want it every time. So what will happen is it depends on what the offering is. If I'm doing something that's very focused on, this is a yoga nidra offering solely or mostly about yoga nidra, which we're going to talk about when we get to context in a little while, then I will sort of show this is an option and let me know if you want to give this a try. Or if I have an assistant or something and I say, we're going to go around and put this on everyone. If it feels uncomfortable, you don't like it, it's too much, then take them off. You want one instead of two, and we have more time for everyone to play with it. But what I do otherwise is if I see that someone's restless, if they have if I know due to their intake or due to them being a regular student, or I know they have something going on, they come in anxious, that they've had some trauma or stress recently, or they're very skinny, mini, hypermobile, kind of come in looking like a deer in headlights type of person, vata, 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 then I will specifically go to that kind of person and offer it to them. Or the pitta type of person that's looking around going like, is this right? Am I doing this right? Is this what's everybody else doing? Am I accomplishing this pose the way I'm supposed to be? And they're craning their neck and trying to see if they're getting it right. And then I'm looking for, if there's too much rajas, then I want to weigh it down a little bit, or too much lagu, too much lightness, then I want to weigh it down a little bit more. Someone that comes in sort of depressive with extra packaging on them, like too much extra packaging for their constitution, they look unhappy, there's more tamas, or there's more heaviness and so on in the whole karma there, then I wouldn't offer it necessarily. They may want it and they may like it because like attracts like, and so they're drawn to that. And I won't tell them not to have it because they may want to nap, and I'm not going to block that necessarily. But I wouldn't go up to them. They wouldn't be the person that I would say, oh, you definitely want to have these. And I've had cases where I've put 4 blankets on someone. Then when I do put it on, I will always say, can I put some weight on you? Some people find it very grounding and relaxing and comforting. And if they say yes, or I don't know, say, okay, let's try. I'm going to do 1 and I'm going to do a second. I always do 2. Depending on what kind of blankets you are, you'll have to play with that in your own body and experiment. But 2 of these big, thick plaid blankets. And then I'll give them a moment. Sometimes I'll even say, just sit with that, check in with that, lie with that. And I'll go check on another student and I'll say, I'm going to come back and check. Then I'll come back and check. Do you like it? You don't like it? They may say, I love it. Can I have another one? Or I don't like it. Can we just do 1 less? Or I like it. I think I like it. I'll say, great, leave it. If at some point during the guided awareness it's too much, then quietly remove them. Okay? It's a long explanation about the blankets, but there's a lot of nuance there. So it's actually a really good question. Anyone else?
Yeah. Is there a reason to start the guided awareness from the head or the feet on from a more subtle perspective, intention wise, or probably with what type of people or energy that comes into the room? Yeah.
So Elaine, if I forget, then ask it again when we get to the script.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Kaya, I have a question.
Yes.
If you can see me.
Hi, Leslie.
So, hi. So I did another Nidra training where we did a lot with, like, first you do the samasana, and then some like vayu mudras, and then you go in, asana, then shavasana, and then pranayama mudra meditation, and then you go into the Nidra practice. And I was just wondering, you suggested starting with the shavasana at the beginning, and I'm wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit more about starting from the beginning, and maybe what you think about, like, kind of getting the body in its seat and the kind of energy in its spot to do the Nidra.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, just to bring it out for everyone else listening, that what that's doing is peeling away levels of tamas, so that by the time the students you're going from the most gross practice all the way to the most subtle. And so by the time they get to Yoga Nidra, they're really more likely to stay in the wakeful state while going into that delta wave state. There's more potential for that by going the way that you just described that training went. And so what my classes often do is start with Shavasana and end with Shavasana. Okay. And the starting Shavasana, they are much less likely to go into the Yoga Nidra state. That starting Shavasana is a recovery Shavasana, recovery from your life, arrive in the room, land in your body. If you need a nap because you're exhausted, you're going to have a nice nap. And that draws the mind and senses inward, pratyahara, so that then when they do the poses that follow, the poses have a deeper effect. And then they do Shavasana again at the end. And it's that Shavasana that has more potential for Yoga Nidra state to happen.
Oh, okay. So the Shavasana, would you, I don't know if you're going to go into this later, but is the script and the approach going to be different between the two Shavasanas, beginning and the end?
I generally do the same script at the beginning and the end of one particular class or one particular month-long theme or whatever. I do the repetition. I am a big fan of repetition. Okay. Because then it's less activating to the mind. We're not like, oh, what's she talking about now? They can really surrender into that. They've heard it before, and that allows the mind to actually settle more. So that first Shavasana is preparation for the class, and then the whole rest of the class is really preparation for the final Shavasana.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question, because I was talking about the first Shavasana, but really the second Shavasana or the final Shavasana, if you were to bookend it like that, you don't have to. You could do just a Shavasana at the beginning and know that that Shavasana is really going to be about rest, relaxation, recovery, which is all very beneficial, and end with meditation. Okay, which sometimes I do. Or you can not start with Shavasana at all, do a class and end with Shavasana Yoga Nidra. All of that is fine. And some of this stuff, it's okay to spend the time on the questions now, because these are things that I was going to address later, and we'll address them now. So I'm going to go into Sankalpa, okay? Unless you have a burning question. Now's your chance. Okay. Sankalpa. So remember that the Sankalpa is a resolve to resolve something. Okay? A simple statement in the positive, not in a negative, not I'm not anxious anymore, but I'm safe and secure. Okay? That's a Sankalpa. In the Yoga Nidra context, a Sankalpa can be anything like, I'm going to do the dishes every day. That can also be a Sankalpa, okay? It's any firm resolve or firm commitment to something that's based in Dharma, okay? Is it Sankalpa? So, my suggestion, and this was asked in the last class, I think, is that in general, if you're doing Yoga Nidra offerings, just a Yoga Nidra class or Yoga Nidra as part of a larger format regular yoga class with Yoga Nidra at the end, say, that you just create a Sankalpa yourself. And that may be in the form of a contemplation rather than a Sankalpa, which I'll differentiate in a little bit, okay? But you can come up with something that is relatively universal. How do you know what's universal? Here's how you know it's universal. Actually, I think I have another. Oh, yeah, it's on this page. So it's on this. Where is it? Yes. So how you create one that's for your class, you can find one for yourself. Okay? Based on your own struggles, what are your actions that you're noticing are problematic in your life? Track those actions back into the mental activity that's driving those actions. Okay? And then track the vrittis into the vasana. What's the impression in my life that's causing these vrittis to be as they are? And then see if you can track that into creating a sankalpa for yourself that's at the level of samskara. And I'll give an example in a moment. If it's true for you, if it's something at the level of samskara, at the causal level, it is likely to be a shared problem amongst others. Now, it may not be other people's number one problem, but guess what? Keeping yoga teachers in business is we don't all have just one problem. Okay, so it will be true for many of your students, and especially your students, because they resonate with you. They will have some shared issues with you, okay? And then the other way to see if it's the way to really check if it's universal is this rooted in timeless teachings? Where do we go to find timeless teachings? Teachers and texts. Okay, so Does Patanjali talk about this? Does Krishna talk about it in the Bhagavad Gita? Is this addressed in the Upanishads in some way? Does my teacher talk about this issue as being universal? Okay. So an example would be overeating. That's the karma. The action is overeating. So then we track this into the vritti. What's the thought that drives someone to eat when they're not hungry? Well, the vritti is going, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake. That's the vritti that drives the body to get up and get the piece of chocolate cake. The vritti is chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake. What's driving that vritti? There is a vasana that is about feeling hunger or feeling a lack in some way. Tracking that to a sanskara might look something like there is a deep sense of dissatisfaction. That makes sense? So we go from deep dissatisfaction into hunger. I'm hungry. I don't have enough. Maybe there were experiences in this life that left that impression. For example, maybe there wasn't enough food in the house growing up, or snacking wasn't allowed. Okay, so there's the impression in this life, the vasana, that's a vasana from this life. That drives the vrittis. Chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, and that drives action. Okay, so how we can track it in both directions, and you can investigate your actions into your thought waves, into the vasana, and the life circumstance that left that vasana, all the way to now sanskara. So now the sanskara, what did I say? Something about a deep sense of dissatisfaction. If you believe in reincarnation, doesn't matter whether you do or not, but you could say maybe for many lives there was a lack or something was taken or whatever, okay? Doesn't matter really, okay? Why it's there, what matters is how do we resolve it. So we take that sanskara and we turn it into a sankalpa. I am whole and complete as I am. And then we check. Is that a universal teaching? Is that a teaching in the Vedic tradition, the yoga tradition, any other tradition you want to choose from? Is that a teaching in Kabbalah? Is it found somewhere as a universally shared principle amongst human beings? The need to discover I am whole and complete as I am. And in the yoga tradition, in the Vedic tradition, that universal principle is known as Purna. Okay? So you can do this as a contemplation or as a sankalpa. I use Sanskrit in my classes because I teach a lot of yoga teachers and they like Sanskrit. So Purna Nidra, that's my Purna Nidra script. And it has a Purna, whole and complete as you are, sankalpa or contemplation at the beginning. Okay? So you can do that. You can create one for your students by just coming up with a list of universal principles because you're well versed in that kind of a thing, or by tracking it into your own, or tracking it into what you notice in your students. Where do I think that's coming from? And could I come up with a sankalpa that would help that person and all of the students who probably have that shared issue? It takes some time and some contemplation and investigating on your part and some study. Okay. You could also, if you're one-on-one, work with a client. They're struggling with someone, and you can do what I just did quickly. It may take a little more time, but you can unravel it with them to the vrittis, the action. I keep doing this thing. What's the vritti? What's the vasana? What's the sanskara? Can we come up with a sankalpa? Now, I'm telling you this because you guys somebody was going to ask, how do I help someone come up with this? Or how do I come up with my own? But I also want to leave you with a warning that you are not psychotherapists. Some of you may be, I don't know, but most of you I don't think are psychotherapists. Not all of you are versed in things like Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Patanjali, Yoga Sutras, to the level to be able to really know if you're hitting a universal principle when you're doing this with someone else. And so don't do this if you really don't know what you're doing. Okay? Because the more subtle things we do, the more powerful they are. The deeper we're going into someone's subconscious, into someone's unconscious. Do you have a shovel to get yourself back out? Okay. Do you have a capacity to enter into that kind of an intimacy with someone without getting caught up in their stuff, without them projecting onto you? If you don't, then think twice about doing this kind of work with someone until you have more training and expertise in this. And this training isn't really about that. I have taught people a process for tracking through their emotion, their actions to the, you know, how to do that more readily. What I just did quickly with the overeating as an example. And we're not really doing that here because that's a whole separate topic. It's a related but other topic, okay? But that is what you could do. You could work one-on-one with someone if that's in your wheelhouse, you have that capacity and interest, and you feel like you would be effective at that, okay? All right, you could also do what I just described. If this is your wheelhouse, you're good at this, this is something you feel confident in and you know what you're talking about and doing, you could do this with a whole group of people. Okay? And everybody's journaling or writing and doing their self-discovery process in order to come up with their own sankalpa. And you take them through the process. Very powerful. And then you don't even actually, it's definitely less intimate to do this with a group than the previous one-on-one scenario because you actually don't have to know what their sankalpa is. You leave it to them. You give them the process and then they come up with it on their own. And then when it's time to do yoga nidra, you say, okay, you're going to repeat your sankalpa to yourself. Okay. And then there's the more vague, which someone had mentioned last week. This is done in a lot of yoga nidra contexts. The teacher will just say something like, now take a moment to become aware of your heart's deepest desire. That's your sankalpa. And again, I tend, as I talked about last week, when the question was asked, I think it was last week, I tend not to do that because most people's desires are nowhere near their deepest desires. They don't really know it. It sounds nice, but nobody really knows what that means without more explanation. And so it'll end up being something that's relatively superficial. No harm in it, but you'll end up with affirmations instead of sankalpas. That's fine. Okay. And also, as I said last time, you know, I think for me, even if someone said that to me, if I didn't come in with something and I just went to a yoga nidra class, I think my mind would bounce around like, oh, maybe that's my heart's deepest. Maybe it's this, you know, I think there would be a tendency to not be able to just calmly stick with one, and that would activate the mind more for some people. Okay. And we did this already. So now a sankalpa is going to be an I am statement. The Mahavakya, I mentioned that when we were looking at the Mandukya Upanishad, the great statements, the great resolves. Mahavakya, Tattvamasi. Okay, things like that. I am that. That's a resolve. I am that. Capital T, consciousness, meaning that. Okay. So a sankalpa is an I am statement. I am whole and complete as I am. I am safe and secure right now. I am satisfied. I am open and available to what comes my way. Like this. I am full of grace and blessing. Okay, I am statements. A contemplation, as I see it, should be still a universal truth, but can be a quote, can be something that's not an I am statement, can be more open and vague than that. And you have handouts for this lesson. Some of you may have printed them already, but they're in the course material page for today's lesson. And this is just a few of, you have a list of contemplations just to get the ball rolling, and you'll find more. You can use these. You'll find more that are resonant for you and your students. And so when the mind is settled, you abide in the truth of your being. That's right out of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Great contemplation. Not a sankalpa, because it's not, a sankalpa would be, my mind is settled, or I abide in the truth of my being. You can turn it into a sankalpa if you want. And when the mind is settled, you abide in the truth of your being. I would differentiate, call that a contemplation. But you'd still use it in the same way. The universe exists within the self. Ramana Maharishi. The greatest miracle is your own beingness. Go to the source from where it has arisen, from Nisargadatta. That'll take them all the way in. This kingdom is not to be found outside, but by turning your consciousness inward to perceive the reality within you. Yogananda. And behold, the kingdom of God is within you, from the Bible. Okay, so these easily take people inward to source, inward to consciousness. Those are contemplations as opposed to a resolve. And I use these a lot, not necessarily these ones, but I mean, I use contemplation personally, actually more than I use sankalpa. In my work, I find that it's, I don't know, it's just how I am. It's just how I work. So you have the option. Is there anything else I want to say about that? Let me see here. Oh, I do want to say, I mentioned this briefly last week. When I'm teaching, when I'm doing Yoga Nidra, I don't talk about samskara, vasana, vrittis, sankalpas. I'm not using those words. I'm not using those terms. And I often do address this when I'm teaching teachers, just as a reminder. You know, our role is not to have our students understand our methodology or the pedagogy, okay? Your teaching method is not their problem, okay? They're there to have an experience. They're there to have an opening, to get the resolve. They don't have to know how it's working or why you're doing it in the way that you're doing it. It's not their concern, and too much information will block the experience. And I'm realizing that sometimes that may get missed if it's not addressed in a teacher training context, because in trainings, you know, we're all interested in how it works and why it works and what's behind it. What's the method behind the effect? They're interested in the effect. And if they want to understand the method behind the effect, then they'll ask you after class, or they'll write you an email, or they'll sign up for a training. Okay. Frozen here. So we're going to let them have, can you guys still hear me? Because my screen is frozen. You can still hear me. Okay. We let them have the inner experience without intellectualizing it for now. Okay. The other thing I want to say is, because we're taking them to this deep state, I don't know why I'm frozen. Because we're taking them to this deep state, now I'm gone. You have to be very, I don't usually like to use the word pure or purity, but you want to have purity in your words, purity in your language. So, I mean, I don't think any of you would do this, but for example, while they're in the Shavasana state, you don't say like, and next week I'm offering a great workshop. You should sign up for it. You don't take advantage of people when they're in that deep, open state. You don't talk about your personal life when they're in that state. You don't market something. You don't distract them from that state. And you don't say anything that would be manipulative, obviously. Okay, the mind is very relaxed and therefore very deeply receptive. So keep what you're doing very on point and very pure in the Yoga Nidra time in particular. You guys, can you guys see me, or am I a blank screen? I'm gonna ask Elaine.
You're
I'm a blank.
frozen.
Hmm?
You're still frozen.
I'm frozen. And I'm from my end, I'm blank.
Your mouse, I can see your mouse moving though, but your screen, like,
Oh, yeah. That's so weird.
on you, you're frozen.
Okay. That's fine. At least you have the screen. I don't know why I'm frozen. Here, let me stop for just a moment. Let's see. If I come out of there. I don't know. Okay. It's raining here. Maybe that's affecting something, but as long as we have a connection. So I'm going to go back to share. Just let me know if something breaks down further in the technology here. Play slideshow. Okay. Alrighty. The other thing about the contemplation I didn't talk about is, well, it is going to be when we get into the script, excuse me, but generally I introduce it at the beginning of the script, relatively close to the beginning, and then again in the same language verbatim, not the time to get creative. Okay, at the beginning and the end of the script. And then you could use that if you're doing a contemplation, more so than an I am sankalpa statement, that also lends itself to be a contemplation that you weave throughout a longer class if you're doing asana and so on as well. Okay. So I think of the approach that I'm going to be sharing, the kind of script that I'm sharing, a little bit more of the divine feminine nectar soma side of the way that yoga nidra can be done. There are many different approaches to yoga nidra, and this is a more soma based, I would say, nectar based than agni or fire based. What I mean by that is that there are some yoga nidra approaches, like 61 point yoga nidra, if you've studied that or experienced that. It's a little, I would say, what do I want to say about it? It's a not soothing approach to yoga nidra. Okay. It's pragmatic. It's highly pragmatic. It gets the job done in a very practical way. So top of the head, tip of the nose, inside of the throat, left shoulder, inside of the left elbow, left wrist, inside of the left palm, like this. Boom, boom, boom. Very effective. It's just a different approach than the one that I'm sharing here in this course, which is why it's Nectar of Nidra. The way that the script is, to me, it's almost like you are lovingly massaging the person with your language. Okay? There's a soothing nectar approach to this, so that you are soothing the person inward, not striking them inward with the script. All right? And one of the reasons that, first of all, this is just coming out of who I am and what my personal background is with my teachers, and who my students tend to be, and what my purpose is in teaching. But I will say that a lot of the yoga nidra that's out there comes from approaches to yoga nidra that are for renunciates, that are for people that don't live worldly lives. And these are people that have dedicated their lives just to moksha, just to enlightenment. And they can take this more classical approach. The classical approach often also has explicit fast visualization. Some of you may have trained in that or experienced some of that. So it'll be like red mountain, blue star. This very esoteric approach to yoga nidra, again, that can be really effective, but is something that's so esoteric that it is better for people that are spending more time as a renunciate than people that are engaged in the world. This is this divine feminine approach, as I call it, the soothing aspect of the way that the script is done, the more embodied way that the script is done, I personally think is something that's more needed right now, a more nourishing yoga nidra, rather than, I want to almost say like an aggressive approach to yoga nidra, okay? This is the soothing approach to yoga nidra. Okay. And if this approach sometimes means that rather than swiftly and directly dropping people off in the yoga nidra state, we soothe them and coax them through the koshas toward the yoga nidra state, opening the doorway, and they end up just sleeping or just in the reverie state, that's okay. Because I want that fully embodied every level experience. And when yoga nidra comes, then it's at the right time for the individual. And then it's doesn't become a disconnected experience for them. Oh, this experience that I had that doesn't then impact all of the koshas and all of the whole life. I'm not sure whether that makes complete sense, but I did want to address how this is a little bit different, and there is value to all the different ways to do this, but this is this way. Okay, so moving towards script, some general principles. Again, the body should be in a neutral position, like Shavasana, in which it can relax and surrender. If there's music or sound, which you can just have silence, if you do have music or sound, it should be not distracting in any way. These principles you also have in your handouts. Something like a drone, like a tambura, or relatively quiet, soothing, something not classical music, not words, nothing you would want to sing along to, nothing sing-songy or distracting if you're having sound or music in the background. Again, the light shouldn't be too bright nor too dark, as we discussed. You'll need to leave silence and pauses between the phrases, and silence at the end, at least 4 minutes, all the way up to 20 minutes of silence towards the, as part of the script. And we're going to look at that more explicitly. In all, let's see. Your voice should be natural, gentle, calming. Don't sound robotic. And you may, as you write scripts, start out reading a script, which is fine. Just make sure you don't sound like you're reading and don't sound robotic. Like, notice your shoulders. Sound like a normal person, okay? Like you're soothing someone. So it's not going to be your normal intense voice if you're an intense person, or your normal fast voice if you're a fast talking person. It's going to be slower and soothier than your normal voice, but not robotic and not sing-songy. And everybody just calm down. Don't do that. That's distracting. And not excessively breathy. I talked about that before. That's also a distraction. Don't use your voice in any way that would be distracting, because this is not about you. You're trying not to draw attention to you. You're drawing their attention inward. And so you want to be as out of the way as possible, yet as responsible as possible at the same time, if that makes sense. You're out of the way and responsible at the same time. Okay. So the script principles, what you'll see. So in your handouts, you're going to have a script, which I just realized I'm going to need to look at. Actually, I can pull it up when I get to that part. So in the script, there's going to be a left-hand column that gives specific principles. And then on the right side, there'll be examples of those principles. We're going to get to that in a minute. But what you'll see is that it's a systematic survey of the physical body that moves in a particular direction. So that may be from right to left, or left to right, from head to toe or toe to head. Sort of like you're painting the body in a particular direction. All right, and you can start from outside in as well, from skin to muscle to bone to organs to nerves and the blood to space inside. I have one that's like that in this course, something from outside in. And always addressing something that's non-physical, whether you want to talk koshas or chakras or space inside the body or the self. Okay, in whatever way that is natural to you, go towards something subtle, outside, inside, as Gelsey mentioned. The level of detail that you're using should remain consistent throughout the body. In other words, if you're going to do, hands, let's say this, hands, fingers, thumbs. Then when you get to the feet, say feet and toes. Don't go feet, tops of the feet, soles of the feet, inside of the feet, every knuckle of every toe, first toe, second toe, and so on. So keep it symmetrical, keep it balanced, keep it even. If we're going to high detail, then go into high detail throughout, which makes sense if you do a longer yoga nidra. If you're going to do less detail, then do less detail throughout. Don't be vague in one area and then fixate on every little detail in another area of the body. Keep it relatively symmetrical in terms of the amount of detail that you're giving. Keep that consistent. Again, you're going to progressively move from gross to subtle in some way. The language should be consistent and repetitive. So if you're going to say be aware of, then just keep saying be aware of. You don't have to don't try to entertain them. Don't say be aware of your toes and notice your feet and check in with your ankles and feel your legs. Just repeat. Be aware of, be aware of, be aware of, or notice, 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 or sense, 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 or don't say any of that. Just say toes of the right foot, right ankle, right lower leg, right knee. You don't have to say notice or be aware of. That's another way to go. Clean language. You can start with the body, or you can start with the space around the body, your environment. Be aware of your environment. This is especially effective if it's a stressful time in the world or in your area in which you live, or you're noticing a lot of your students are coming in stressed. Then go ahead and start with the environment, because their minds are more outward. So you're going to start where they are. Be aware of the sounds, smells of the room. Be aware of the sound of my voice, and then take them to the body. The language should also be consistent in terms of saying your toes or the toes. Then do that throughout the body. And those that have studied with me yoga or yoga nidra before know that this is something that I will really fixate on. I don't say, notice your arms, your shoulders, the neck. Pick one. It's the neck or it's your neck, and then do that all the way throughout. And then unless you're teaching young children, don't say our toes, our ankles, our knees, and so on, okay? Because we're trying to draw people into their own inner experience. So it's not our spines, it's your spine or the spine, okay? You're taking, even if it's a group, right? You're taking a group through an individual process. They're not concerned. It's your problem that it's a group. They're there for themselves. So don't say our. And what's on the bottom here? And then you can do something that just names, that just surveys. just as a systematic survey without any particular flavor, okay, or introducing any particular theme throughout, or you can introduce and direct a particular experience. Light. So my Agni Nidra, I didn't include that in this course yet, but it is actually in the link for this week's class. It'll be in there. Agni Nidra brings light in. The toes fill with light, the feet fill with light, and so on. You could bring in heaviness or groundedness, rootedness. You could say that things are melting, softening, bring in the liquid idea, or you could bring in a concept of firmness, wholeness, protectedness. So you can weave in and direct a particular experience or not. Okay, so the skeleton of the script. And now I'm realizing I'm still a blank person, huh? Let me see. Why that might be. I have the option to touch up my appearance. I think it's perfectly touched up right now. I'm just in the void. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I don't know. Alrighty, so stop share. Let's see if I can pull up this other thing. You guys see this guided awareness general principles on the screen? Okay, cool, great. Okay, so this is a handout. We're just gonna go through it, all right, so that then we can address any questions that come up. So the principle is that you start with settling the body. That is literally getting people's bodies into the neutral position that you're using. For example, most likely Shavasana, all right? And then you can say, settle into Shavasana, or allow your body to soften here, or see if you can relax more than you already are. Some language to remind them to relax, settle, release, soften, lean in to the position that they're in. Then a preparation and explanation. Now, if you're doing this ongoing with the same students or clients, you don't necessarily have to do that. But if you're doing this with new people, or there's even maybe 1 or 2 new people in the room, you might just say what you're doing. We're going to do a guided awareness to draw the mind and senses inward. This is an example. You don't have to say it in this way. As we progress, you may not hear everything I say. It is completely fine if that's the case. You may even feel as if you're sleeping. This is also completely fine. Allow your breathing to be easy and natural. Oh, wait. Whatever happens for you is fine and just right for you right now. Okay? You could even say more than that. You can say, I'm going to talk for a little while, doing a guided awareness or a relaxation. This is to open the doorway into a deeper level of consciousness. Then there'll be silence for a period of time, and then I'll bring your awareness back. You can say as much as you want in terms of explanation, depending on whether you have students that tend to need more explanation. But again, you're not going to get deep into your methodology. You're just telling them what's going to happen, because some people will have a mind that quiets quicker if they know what's coming. So how you decide how much you're going to say, what you're going to say, when you're going to say it is based on your purpose, which is quiet mind, which is resolve. So if giving more explanation is going to help your students get more quiet, draw inward, relax more, then say more, or say less if that's better. Then a breath awareness of some kind. You can have them take a few long, slow breaths, You can have them just be aware of the breathing. What I have here in the example is allow your breathing to be easy and natural. As you relax, your breathing may become very subtle and faint, or your breathing may become long and deep. Whatever happens with your breathing is fine and just right for you right now. Because I don't want them to fixate on their breathing. This is not a breathing practice, it's a Yoga Nidra practice. There are Yoga Nidra practices that bring in intentional breath. It's just not what I'm doing with this general script, okay? Then you can introduce a sankalpa or a contemplation, something neutral, a promise about the nature of the self, something appropriate for your students. Like if you have a bunch of newcomers, or you're teaching a yoga for athletes class or something, don't do something Sanskrit heavy. Okay, something appropriate for the students. It can be a sankalpa or a contemplation. I used to teach in a church for a number of years to these church ladies. They're mostly in their 60s and 70s. And so, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Perfect for that group, okay? And then begin inward drawing of the senses. So here it says you can allow your mind to be at ease and draw itself inward into the space around you, including the sound around you. You are in a safe and protected environment. So that's the space. And then drawing the senses inward. Now become aware of your whole body. Okay? So something that draws them to the body, starting with the body or starting with the space around them. Be aware of your body in some way. And then a main body script, or main script. And this is that surveying of the body. Again, from toes to head, from head to toes, right to left, left and right. Skin in, so outside in. You can say softening or allowing or filling with awareness or filling with light. Or see the other examples that are in this course. You can go into chakras, being aware of the space between the eyebrows. And the space, being aware of the place, and the space inside that place. Being aware of the place inside of your throat and the space inside that place. So what is that? Chakras, the place between the breasts or in the center of the chest and the space inside that place. Okay, so you can go into chakras. Then this piece is optional. You can do a repetition, so you can do a survey and then do a second survey exactly the same or with less words and longer pauses. Resurvey. So for example, if you did notice the top of your head, the sides of your head, and back of your head, and your face, and the space inside your head. Notice it, and so on. You survey like that, then you can do a second survey through and you can just say your head, neck, and so on. Simple, more pauses in between. It draws them in deeper. And then some means of preparing them for silence. You can say something like continue to be aware. You can say abide in that. Rest in that. Abide in silence. Some statement that lets your students know consistently it's going to be quiet now without you saying, now we'll be quiet for 10 minutes. Because what happens is as soon as you start talking about time, you are reactivating the mind. If they are already at that point drawn inward into the subtle body or even into the causal body, as soon as you mention time again, it pulls them back out. Because in the causal level, there's no time. So my preference is that, or my approach is that you don't say, now we'll be quiet for 5 minutes. If you want to tell them how long it's going to be, tell them at the beginning during the explanation and preparation time. But you're giving them a signal that now we're going to be quiet here. So that lets the mind go more. So my students have heard me say countless times, abide in that. That's what I say every time. It's my unchanging statement in every single guided awareness that I do. I think, listen back to those recordings, abide in that is what I say. And my students then come to know, oh, this is now the silent time of the guided awareness. And the mind lets go. Okay, so preparing for silence in some way. And then silence. If this is a shorter, meaning 10 to 15 minute Shavasana, then the silence is going to be 4 to 10 minutes long. And in a little while, I'll talk about longer format Shavasana, okay? But if this is at the beginning or end of a yoga class, the silence will be 4 to 10 minutes long. 10 is even long. If this is if you're doing a script, the script is going to take you 5 to 10 minutes itself, okay? And then you're going to have 5 to 10 minutes of silence. Somewhere in the zone of 7 minutes of silence is what I'm usually looking at for a regular yoga class. And then you're going to bring them out by breath awareness. Notice your breathing, or become aware of your breathing. And take a long breath in and an easy exhale, or give yourself a few long, slow breaths. Bring your awareness back to the breath, something like that, okay? So you're drawing them out, right? They're deep in there. You wouldn't all of a sudden say, sense the room around you. You're tracking them back out. And then bringing them to their body through movement, wiggling your toes and feet, rolling your head from side to side, something like that. Bring them back into movement. You could even have them do like bring your hands up and massage your arms with your hands and massage your legs with your hands, something to bring them back to the body. Questions?
Kaya, I have a question about the Sankalpa.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that it is different from an affirmation. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Is it Sonia? Hi. Okay, so can you give me an example, someone, of an affirmation, a positive affirmation? When I think of affirmation, I'm going to look up some examples.
You could say something like, I am loved and I'm whole. Like you'll see those little cards a lot.
Yeah. So some of what people call affirmations are like a sankalpa because they are universally true and they touch on a universal struggle. Some affirmations are kind of like a fake it till you make it. Yeah. So, okay, here's an example of one. What's that?
Like you would just say, like, if you're actually feeling sad, you'd just be like, I am happy. I am happy.
Exactly. And that's basically bullshit. And the mind knows that it's bullshit. So it's ineffective. Okay. Here's one. That's funny. Avoid carbs. Oh God. Okay. There's so many about carbs. If you Google positive affirmations, what a sad state we're in. Okay. My health is the most important thing to me. Okay. Now the person using that affirmation, we know the reason they're using that affirmation is because their health is not the most important thing to them. So it doesn't go as deep. And the studies have actually, some studies have shown, who knows about studies, that these are actually relatively ineffective over time. They kind of give a short-term relief, but Oh my God, there's so many of them about food. These poor people. Okay, so they just don't get to a deeper universal. So instead of, this affirmation, what was it? My health is the most important thing to me. It's not the most important thing to the person, or they wouldn't be struggling with valuing their own health. So they're just not going very deep with this. So what would be a deeper sankalpa that you could come up with is that, my health is, so somebody who is struggling to value their own health. So the action is they're doing unhealthy things. The vritti is that they are, the vrittis are sit on the couch, watch scary movies, eat fried donuts, whatever those vrittis are. The vasana is, you know what it is? It is something about not mattering. Okay, as an example. It could be a lot of things, but for example, then the sankalpa, if we root it back, it could be a sankalpa would be, I matter. Okay, or I have value. And that is true. My health is the most important thing to me is not true. They want it to be true. And this is where I think when you say to students, when people say to students, come up with your heart's deepest desire, they will come up with an affirmation. Again, there's nothing necessarily wrong in it, but it's a fake it till you make it approach that's not really getting to a deeper resolve. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. But then some things that are called affirmations may actually be sankalpas. So then we would call them sankalpas instead of affirmations.
Yeah, I think a lot about like Louise Hay. She uses a lot of, which I find her affirmations to be really effective, but I completely agree. There's a lot of those that are out there that are just, and I think that's the piece that, like when we said that about it's affirmations not being true versus the sankalpa. So
right.
That's
okay. And Louise Hay's work may be more like sankalpa. It's just English is not very refined. And so affirmation is this full range from like, I don't eat carbs anymore to I am whole and complete as I am could also be an affirmation. Okay. So that's that. It's a good question. What else? Sankalpas and scripts.
Kaya, will you address the head versus feet?
Oh, yes. Okay, right. So why would you do one instead of the other? It may just be what you're in the mood to do, your personal preference. Or if you are a theme nerd like me, you may think about what's appropriate to the theme. So if I'm going to do Soma, I'm going to go from head to toe, for example, because the Soma drips down. If I'm going to do Agni, I'm going to do from the toes up because Agni, fire, moves up the spine, moves up. And I do head to toe, I don't do a lot of left, right. If I'm going to do outside in, then I might do that because people are very externalized. It's a stressful time. It was just the elections or, whatever. People are particularly mentally activated and their minds are not just on the outside of their bodies. Their minds are way out there in the world. Then I might go from outside in. Okay. Or if I'm going to teach a whole class that has to do with being aware of the spaciousness inside the body, then I might go from outside in, from the skin into the space. If I'm doing something if I'm going to teach a class that is more about, say, something like empowerment and wakefulness and aliveness, okay, I might go from the toes up. I want them to be more awake, aware, and so we want that upward rising energy. If I'm doing something that's about grounding, calming, soothing, I might go from the head down. If I'm teaching pregnant women in the first trimester, I might go from the toes up because I don't want them to have too much downward flow. risk of miscarriage in the first trimester. We go from the toes up. If I'm teaching a pregnant woman who's at her due date or past her due date, we're going down, head down, downward flow. Okay, so you think about, you can make a choice based on your theme, based on who you're teaching, the season. Left to right or right to left, you also could think about Ida and Pingala Nadi. Do I want to leave them in the right side, or do I want to leave them abiding, having done the left side? Whichever one you do last is where you're letting them rest. So Ida Pingala Nadi, or the Agni and Soma sides, okay? The right side being the more masculine, activated, warm side, and the left side being the more cool, meditative, feminine side. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Hiya,
Yes.
it's Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, I have just a quick question. You talked about the filling, filling different body parts, and you gave examples. And as I'm writing this yoga nidra, is it okay for me to say that you can fill different parts with stillness? Is that appropriate or not?
Fill with stillness. Yeah.
Okay.
I think my mind went to be aware of the stillness there.
Okay.
That's already there. But I think you could do it either way. And I go ahead and write it one way. And we talked about you doing this before, you know, and then record it and listen to it yourself and see what's effective.
Okay.
I don't see anything wrong with fill it with stillness. It's just where my mind went. So we all have our own flavor. That's the beauty of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Hi, Kaya.
Yes.
It's Emma here.
Hi, Emma.
I just wondered about like heavy and light in the same script. So if you were to use heavy, and then light as well, is that balanced? Is that too much like the 61 points, or?
I think you could do that if it makes sense for your point.
Yeah.
And then I don't know whether you would be making a choice about, are you emphasizing one or the other? Are you starting with heavy and bringing them to light? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
It's so cool. I've taken a lot of people through this process and I've never seen two scripts alike yet. It's amazing. Anyone else? We have a few more things to cover. Is that possible? Oh my gosh, it's already as late as it is. Okay, let me try to move on here. Let's see here. I was trying to squeeze a lot into today, but I know we can cover more next time. Okay, so the context is this, you would think about, is this a class or a one-on-one session? And what is the sequencing meaning? Is this a yogasana class with yoga nidra in it? Or is this a yoga nidra offering with asana or not? Okay, maybe the asana is shavasana. And I think actually we'll talk about that next time, but that would just affect the length of your script. Okay. My suggestion is that you think about, because your homework is going to be to write a script. My suggestion at this point is that you think about a somewhat shorter script. So plan on no more than 20 minutes total, including the silence. Something that you could do, and that would be a long one for the end of a yoga class. So it might be that you're thinking more about something like 10 to 12 minutes, including the silence. So say 5 to 7 minutes of talking and 5 to 7 minutes of silence. Okay. And I'll talk about including poses and doing a longer Shavasana next time. Yeah, so that's that one. The teacher position. So when you're leading this, I personally prefer to sit with, I prefer to have the students' heads towards me, feet away. Because I'm doing propping chairs or blankets, these people are obviously preparing for Shavasana or coming out of Shavasana. This is not their Shavasana pose, holding their knees. They're in Supta Garbhasana. But then I can see their bodies. Why do I want to see their bodies? What if someone's crying? What if someone is grimacing in discomfort? Okay, or what if their body is very misaligned? I'll be able to see that when their heads are towards me and their feet are away with all this propping in particular, because otherwise I'll just be looking at a bunch of blankets. Okay. Then there's energetic reasons why some of you have studied in an Indian context or in a traditional context, and we never point the feet at the teacher. So there's that as well. And the other reason is when you're talking, if you can see in this image, we'll be talking to the students from this position. The words of the guided awareness in this way are washing over them. Whereas if their feet are pointing towards, there's more of a tendency for them to block. Okay. Oh, I just saw some chats that came in. Sorry, when the feet are towards the teacher, there's more of an ability to block the guided awareness that's coming through. Leslie, an affirmation is like Stuart Smalley, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like me. Right, like you're not good enough or smart enough, and people don't like you. So it's not necessarily true. That's right. Yeah, Stuart Smalley or Smiley or whatever his name was. That was an affirmation. Yeah.
Okay. Kaya.
Yes.
I think that the screen might have frozen. I think that's what's happening for everybody.
Let me see. Jen, did I freeze or can you see or can you hear me?
Yeah, the screen is back at how to write the script.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Still?
On mine.
Yeah, for all of you? Yeah, it must be for all of you. It's pouring rain where I am, so there must be like a connection problem. Let me see here. What happens if I stop the video? Ooh, there's my face at least. I didn't know that existed. Oh man. Sorry, you all. Let's see. And let me see this. Oh. My goodness. Yeah, I think that my internet blanked out for a minute because something else got weird here. Resume share. What do you guys see right now? Do you see a naked lady painting? No? Oh, it's so weird. What do you see?
I see the softening section of the how to write a script.
Oh my goodness. Hold on. Sorry, everybody. Thanks for telling me. Okay. Yeah, something's weird with the system because I'm getting like messages. New share. Well, maybe we'll pause and I'll just tell you the homework and then we'll pick up the rest because anyway, it's already been our full time and I don't want to take advantage of your time anyway. What do you guys see now? You don't see me, a picture of me sitting in front of a room?
Yeah, now I do.
Now you do. Okay, well, that's what I was talking about. When have you seen me again? And my video's back. So weird.
There it is.
Okay, here I am, just in time to say goodbye. All right, so that's a teacher position that I use for those that want to know or ask, and the reasons why were the guided awareness washes over them, their feet aren't pointing towards me, which is not what you're supposed to do for the teacher, and I can see their bodies better. I don't have a bunch of blankets or chairs blocking. That was so weird. What may happen in Shavasana? They may just have a deep relaxation and get all the benefit of being deeply relaxed, yeah, which we've talked about. And that would be alpha brainwaves for those that are interested in that kind of thing, and all the benefits of that: physical well-being and mental and emotional rest and replenishment to the body and mind and the prana. They may go into a peaceful healing reverie state, that place between waking and sleeping, kind of the daydream state. This is also alpha brainwaves, and there's a lot of benefit to that. It's just very blissful and peaceful and replenishing as well. They may go into dreaming state, which is the theta waves, and then they're dealing with the subtle material of vasana, and they'll be in the level of the subtle body and getting replenishment there. They may have a gamma experience of super consciousness, sort of this transcendental state, hypersensory. They may be hearing angelic singing and getting light visions and sort of those transcendental experiences, or deep sense of gratitude, heightened sense of sort of ecstatic bliss. This is the least likely one. I've seen it the least, but it does happen. And sometimes there could be tears or bursting out laughter if someone's having this state of experience. And then they could go into deep sleep, delta waves, deep, gone, nap time, okay, where there's no material. Or they could go into yoga nidra, which we all know what that is. There's also no material, but you're aware while you're in that deep state. There's a witness consciousness. You, the personality, are not aware of it, but the witness consciousness is aware of it. And that's yoga nidra, okay? So one thing to be aware of as you're writing your script and as you start sharing yoga nidra, though we're not done with the course yet, is not to be allured by the body. This is already a problem in the yoga world because it's a problem in the human mind and psyche, is obsession with the body, obsession with objects of the world. And the object that's closest to you is your body. Okay. So this is not an anatomy lesson. This is not about, but what if I don't talk about the fascia? That's not anatomically accurate. If I'm going from outside and I don't mention fascia, or I don't mention nerve tissue, or I don't mention the blood or something. This is a tool. It's a vehicle. It's not an anatomy lesson. And then even more so with the subtle body, do not use the guided awareness as a means of educating people about the subtle body, okay? Or about getting lost in the subtle body. We don't want to get lost just at the level of the physical or the subtle. It's still another form of allurement, even though you may write a beautiful, detailed, guided awareness of the subtle body and every little thing about it and all of the flows and channels and what it all means. That's a lecture. That's not a yoga nidra. Okay, so be aware of not getting allured there, or not just dropping your students off at just the physical body or at the subtle body. Use those levels of the being as a vehicle to go to the place of the causal body, which is why you want to end up with the space or with the consciousness or the silence inside. Okay. Because even the subtle body, sometimes what happens is that yogis get really into they get very allured by the subtle body and they stop there. Oh, but in my meditations, I'm having all these visions and this blissful experience and all this da-da-da-da. That's fine, but you'll get stuck there. It's more dangerous even than sort of obsessing on the physical body, because it's even more enticing and alluring, okay? It can be sort of addictive to get addicted to the bliss of the subtle body. And there's no real spiritual maturation that happens when you get stuck there, and definitely no real resolve, which has to take place at the deeper level, at the Anandamaya Kosha. Okay? You want to go all the way to the source. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. Actually, there's more here, and we'll save it. Let me see. Till next time. I'll explain the homework and do a prayer, and then I'll leave one more time for questions. So, What's next is, so as the schedule stands, as I planned it, but I'm having second thoughts. I'll take your feedback on it, actually. My plan was to give you just this week to write a Yoga Nidra script. And what I like about that is you've got momentum, those of you that have been able to attend live, and the best time to do it is like in the next 24 hours while all of this is fresh. Just get it on paper and then start refining it, playing with it. You can record yourself and listen and do Shavasana to your own recording and see the effect, or do it for a friend or family member and so on. And then you would actually turn it in by, there's a place to just basically drop it into the course materials page for this week. And then next week's class, I'm going to take the ones that get turned in and in live real time, go through them and sort of refine them. And even if yours doesn't get done, you'll learn a lot just by sort of workshopping other people's guided awareness. But I have a hesitation that maybe that feels like it's not enough time for you guys, in which case we can save that piece. I'll do it in a different way because I still have more material that I could do next week instead. So you tell me if you have a preference. Does it feel like it's too fast of a turnaround to do the guided awareness by next week? Write a script. Speak up if you want more time. And some of you can take more time. You don't have to turn them in, but if you want yours to be workshopped and you want to track along in real time with the course, you would turn it in by next Thursday. What do you think? No one's protesting. That sounds okay then. If you protest, you don't have to do it then, as I said. Okay, good. I read something that said 90% of people who do online courses don't finish them. So I do think it's nice to just keep the momentum going. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's definitely believable. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to do. You're going to take this lesson and all the previous lessons, all the knowledge there gathered up to this point. Simple is good. You can write endless scripts with the skeleton, okay? And some of you have done other Yoga Nidra trainings as well. For this, just use this skeleton and follow through with this and see what you come up with. And you can go back and listen to all of the other recordings that I've sent or other people's recordings to get inspired, or read texts, or think about your own sankalpa and write a script based on that, and so on, okay? And I'll do the prayer and then I'll take questions for those who want to stay on the line. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That is whole, Purna. This is whole. From this wholeness comes that wholeness. Taking wholeness from wholeness. Wholeness indeed remains. Om, peace, 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 unto the three sources of karma. All right, thank you all for joining live, and all the rest of you for watching now, whenever that is. And if you want to stay on the line, if you have any questions, feel free, and I'll stay on. If you hang up, then see you next time. And if you have a question and you're staying on, then you can unmute. I know some of you just like to stay on to hear other people's questions. If you have a question, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Kaya.
Hi.
You said about 20 minutes for the whole thing, from getting them settled in to them coming out.
I would say that's maximum if this is, say, something that you're doing at the end of a yoga class or as part of a yoga private session.
Okay.
And you can also do 20 minutes for just Yoga Nidra alone without doing other things. And next time I'll talk about what other poses you could do if you're focusing on mainly Yoga Nidra alone. and you want to just do like 1 or 2 poses in addition to that, in which case you could be doing a longer yoga nidra, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, up to something like 40 minutes, which I'll talk about future class. Okay. If it's at the end of a yoga class, you're looking at 10 minutes, you're planned for 15 minutes, because you got to help people get settled and then, pick them up off the floor, kick them out of the room when you're done, and so on. So 10, 12 minutes, and planning for 15 to 20 when it's in a class. Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kaya,
Yeah.
I have a question that maybe is just something I'm thinking about, and I don't know that there's a real answer to it. And then I also don't exactly know how to articulate it. But so I'm teaching right now basically a meditation class.
Oh, good.
I'm teaching it. The environment is not a yoga studio. It's a gyrotonic studio. Different contexts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and I'm teaching from my Sri yoga perspective.
Sure.
And I'm teaching Shavasana and then also seated meditation as the second half. And I've also been doing a lot of personal reading around like early Christian mystics.
Yeah.
And the word contemplation kind of means different things to different people.
Mm.
And you may have said this in last week's class, which I haven't watched the whole thing. So is the yoga nidra, is it meditation? And then in terms of another way to understand the term contemplation is that the way yoga nidra is described is also how contemplation in that other tradition is described. It's like being at one with, God basically is contemplation.
Okay, so.
And then Lectio Divina is reading something and being with the words of the reading, which is, I think, how we use contemplation in this tradition.
Right. In Sanskrit, that's swadhyaya.
Which one? What?
The looking at texts and communing with a text and the teaching of the text is swadhyaya. That's one of the words for it. So there's overlap. As what I said last week, this question did come up, especially because we were talking about the brain waves. And so certain ones are saying, well, these are the meditation waves, this is yoga nidra waves, but there's crossover. But we have to talk about these things categorically in order to understand them, knowing that you could be in meditation, you could be sitting up doing meditation and go into a yoga nidra state technically. You could be lying down and someone's doing yoga nidra script, calling it yoga nidra, and you're in a meditative state or a contemplative state. So, and having said all that, I was going to say, you could write this script and do it with people seated in meditation and call it a meditation. Mm-hmm. It can still be, and they'll be more likely to, and I'll talk about the difference in a moment, they'll be more likely to meditate than yoga nidra because they're sitting up.
Yeah.
Because the upright position, the upright seated cross-legged position, ideally, that's the ideal position, lends itself to meditation and contemplation more so than sleep, whereas the lying down position lends itself to sleep, nidra, more so than meditation, because this tradition would say the difference is between, and I'll talk about contemplation in a moment, the difference between yoga nidra and meditation is meditation involves more alert awarefulness, and not sleep. There's conscious deep sleep, but it's not this person being aware in deep sleep. It's consciousness being aware that it's in a deep sleep. So it's a different thing. it's a much more subtle level of you don't even know that you're there, even though you're there in Yoga Nidra. And the brain waves are sleep waves. In meditation, the idea is that you are in a contemplative place or in a reverie state or in a bliss state, and you're keenly aware of it. And in the Vedanta tradition, it's a contemplative, the meditation and contemplation are very closely connected. You begin with contemplation and that launches you into meditation. I don't know about the Christian mystic tradition. But you take a text or a teaching and you contemplate it and you pull that investigation inward into meditation, and then you sit with it. And then that's meditation. And the mind becomes very still because that's what that teaching is designed to do. And you're sort of pulling that teaching in as far as you can take it. And that brings you into meditation. And you are very much alert and aware of it. Though along the way, you can drop into a void state or a nidra, yoga nidra state, something like that. Reverie state, all of these things can happen along the way in whether you're seated up, meditating, or lying down, shavasana-ing. I don't know how good of an answer that is, but brainwave wise, it's different. And the brainwaves, it's anything from gamma to alpha to even theta in meditation, and not delta waves.
It's interesting. It's more, I think it's more something I'm just thinking about than I need, all the details of it.
Yeah, and this is a conversation. I mean, I don't really have an answer to that, and you're a longtime meditator.
Yeah.
So.
Well, what I saw described in some of these deeper readings, that I'm not in that tradition, the Christian tradition, but what they're describing as the deepest state is the self disappears. Like it's totally gone.
But what is self?
Meaning like awareness that you are someone experiencing something.
Right. So the language is a problem, because what's disappearing is the subject-object differentiation. Like what Vedanta would say is the consciousness doesn't disappear. Consciousness itself, right? But the ahankara disappears. The personality disappears. The subject, yes. Okay, so same thing.
Same thing. That.
And that's the deepest state of meditation as well. But that's
not Nidra.
In Nidra it goes away as well, but you don't know that. You don't know it. You're not there for it.
I get it. It's just, oh my gosh, so interesting.
It is. And again, whichever one of these things happens doesn't matter, because it's all a nectar.
Yeah.
Which is why I really didn't call this course the Yoga Nidra course. It's the Nectar of Nidra course.
Yeah.
Because anything that happens along the way is a nectar. God willing, it's meditation, right? Good for you, them, us, whoever's having that experience. So, yeah.
And then I think why I'm asking, and I'll just end it here, is because that part about like, what's your purpose? Like what, in terms of the class or a series of class, like what do you what's versus there's a theme or whatever, but then what are you really doing? And I just want to be sure I'm not like confused in terms of.
Right. So
what I'm offering or what I'm doing, not like I have to say it, but I'm me wanting to know.
Sure.
And I'm using Nidra as part of the experience of teaching meditation or inviting people to meditate.
Sure. I mean, in a quick way, because I don't know the full thing that you're doing, you could say, well, if I'm doing Yoga Nidra as part of this, for example, if it's a series, you could take just one of those weeks and do just Yoga Nidra or focus on that. Instead of meditation, we're going to lie down. I've done that when I did a meditation sequence before. We started with Yoga Nidra and then we led toward meditation, right? So, or you could do Yoga Nidra and meditation in one offering, and the point of the Yoga Nidra is to get resolve to deepen the meditation so that the sanskaras are starting to resolve so that they're not in the way of the meditative state.
That's super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There's three pillars in Vedanta that I'm thinking of when you're asking about this: Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. I don't know if you've heard those terms before, but maybe we'll talk another time about that because it's basically about what is learning, contemplation, meditating, and living it.
Okay.
And that's what you're talking about.
What I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you guys do the homework or when you go into the materials page, and hopefully you all got the email. If you didn't, please email me. You guys now have a different course access page that's just for teachers, and it'll have the full course. It'll have the link to get on the next call, and it'll also have the place to drop your draft and also a place to directly email any questions. As you start doing this and a question comes up or you're like, I'm thinking of doing this, does that make sense? You can just email me this week or as you're writing it, even if you don't get to it this week. Any other questions while we're on? Okay. I'm going to say goodnight. Thanks all for joining and staying on for cues. See you next time. Bye.